Why do you think, with all the conversations on menopause, women are still finding it challenging to talk to their doctors about sexual health?
Oh, I mean, there's so many layers, right? Like sex is everything and then never talked about. I was just doing a stage show last week for the M Factor documentary, and I'm like, I have the two biggest niches in the entire world, menopause, like women and sex. And I'm like, and nobody wants to talk about either one of them. So here I am. But I mean, it's like society shame. Doctors didn't get trained. Doctors don't know what the hell they're doing with female sexuality. And like, I'm allowed to say that because I didn't know what I was doing. And I'm a urologist. So I was like definitely trained in the male. And I was literally told, don't worry, the gynecologists are taking care of them. And when you do the math, like the math doesn't math. So there's about 50,000 gynecologists, OB-GYNs in America practicing right now. And that is projected to go down to about 47,000. So it's going to get worse. And a lot of those are delivering babies and doing hysterectomies and, birth control. It's like, which one of them are supposed to be taking care of 50% of the population's sexual health? Like the math just doesn't add up. The other bias is that people think that OB-GYNs are the only doctors for women, which is absolutely absurd. 50,000 doctors, it's not enough. We've got 80 million women over the age of 40 in America. Primary care needs to take care of this. Internal medicine needs to take care of this. Like OB-GYN can't be the only sex med doctors. There's just not enough of them.
And you talk about what happened to us in the past that is holding us back.
Yeah. So sex is biopsychosocial, right? Biologic, psychologic, social logic of like, I always come back to the biggest problem is we don't get sex ed and we don't get adult sex ed, right? Like as a teenager, you got a disease and pregnancy prevention plan. If you were lucky, the people who say, like it's the very rare person who's like, my mom told me everything I needed to know and to prioritize my pleasure and what the clitoris is. And like, it's the rare person who's has that mom. But like if anybody got good sex ed, it's either from a mom or like a very good early relationship. And most people don't have very good early sexual relationships because they're having sex with somebody else who also didn't get sex ed, right? So you're limping along, like probably with the help of some hormones. And then midlife happens, and you're like, well, my relationship's routine. It's not new anymore. Like the newness factor of relationships goes a long way. And the brain thinks things aren't new after about a year, right? So relationship might not be new, so you don't have that like dopamine surge, you don't have the hormone surge, and then you're like, oh my God, everything I learned about sex was wrong in the first place and not even neutral. It's like negative, right? Like just sit around and wait for Prince Charming to come and then he's supposed to turn you on all the time and he gives you the orgasm that you're not in control of that, right? Like there's all these like unspoken dogma and then you're like, "Oh my God, it's all wrong." You mean I'm the one? This is my sex life. You're like, "Yeah, it's your sex life." And then women are like, I don't know. I don't know anything.
Are you having sex worth desiring?
Yeah.
And
Well,
that's just women don't even ask themselves that question.
that's a good question though, right? Like
Absolutely.
I was talking to a expert in female sexual health and we were talking about low desire and what's available for low desire. And I looked at him, this is an aha moment like years ago, and I looked at him and I'm like, "You're assuming women are having good sex." And he's like, "Well, yeah." And I'm like, "Oh, well, that's a pretty big assumption." Right? Like, it's one thing if you have low desire and it's good sex, and it's another thing when you have low desire and it's mushy broccoli and like painful nails on a chalkboard, right? Like, you're never ever going to desire the latter one. So that's like, and then to go back to dopamine. So dopamine's actually released in the brain. People think you get like a dopamine hit when you get something. Dopamine's actually released in the anticipation of getting the rewarding thing, but the thing has to be rewarding, right? You're not going to get that dopamine from like making out with cardboard.
Can you talk a little bit about how men's conversations on erectile dysfunction and testosterone use is just kind of blown up and it's fine, but for women, they don't even realize they make testosterone.
Well, and like the huge gender bias on what you should do. So with like with a guy doesn't come in with like low T and low libido, and we're like, yeah, well, but that's natural, and I'm really a natural person, so I think you should do it naturally too. And like, it's just normal to like have a limp when you're 45, right? Like, there's a new yoga class for limp on Tuesdays. Like, let's go do that with all the other natural people who want to naturally just age.
Yeah.
Like, take that conversation, turn it to women, and that's what happens.
Right.
I'm just going to do menopause naturally.
But
I got
it's so yeah,
I got some essential oils. That'll make the ovaries be okay, right?
and I'm
Like
giggling when you say that about the man, but then the woman, it sounds like, yeah, we've all heard this before.
100%. I mean, that's my
Yeah.
superpower. My superpower is I'm a urologist, right?
Yeah.
Like this whole entire argument, whether it's sex or it's hormones or it's how you want to age, it is gender bias and gender inequality until the cows come home for me. And how women oppress women, how doctors oppress women, how everybody keeps women down from living their best life. We do not do that to men. And until that is equal, I will have a job to do. So testosterone is made in the ovaries. Ovaries cannot make estrogen without making testosterone first. So cholesterol, to oversimplify biochem, cholesterol, testosterone, estrogen. So you got to say that first because you can't come out of the gate being like, Kelly thinks people should be on testosterone. And because then people are like, Kelly wants people to transition or be like a man or give them something that's not natural. Right. So you really have to like be like, nobody told you that your ovaries make testosterone. Nobody told you that your ovaries make 4 times the amount of testosterone than estrogen. Sit on that for a hot sec. Okay, let's move forward. So, testosterone starts to decline in women's bodies after your 20s. We don't really know why. We don't know why. Oddly enough, it starts to go up again after you're 70. We don't know why in some women. But those women actually have more heart protection. They have less heart attacks, right? So there's a role for testosterone in heart protection. So much of what I say, though, is extrapolated from observational studies, animal studies, like all this stuff, because again, it's not a branded product. There's not a lot of money in it. It's incredibly expensive to do these studies. So it's very hard for me to say, like, we've got strong data, but with how much we know in men, how much we know in women, like, it's not a leap to say this is a neurohormone. It decreases the risk of joint replacements. In all genders, it decreases the risk of dementia in men. I think this is neuroprotective in women. We don't have great data for me to fall back on. But I'm like, men with low T have a higher rate of dementia. You give a woman testosterone, you ask her how she feels, it's her brain. It is her brain. She's like, I feel more like myself. I have more energy. I don't hit the wall at 3 p.m. I'm not reaching for that cup of coffee. And the other big argument, which I love to point out to people about testosterone and mood, is where's libido?
In your brain.
In your brain.
Yeah.
What is libido? It's a mood.
Yeah, it's mood.
Yeah.
We have multiple randomized controlled, placebo controlled trials showing testosterone's better than placebo for libido in women. So that's a mood, and it helps your moods.
You're working hard to get the FDA approval of testosterone.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you talk about that and what we can do to help in that situation?
Yeah. So what you can do for that situation is write the FDA and or write your senators and say, I want to deregulate testosterone because that's its own issue, and I want a female dosed FDA product. If you go to the testosteroneproject.com, that has all of the pillars. The 3 pillars of the testosteroneproject.com is deregulation of testosterone, because right now it's regulated like narcotics and ketamine, which is insane. But there's lots of prohibitive restrictions put on it because of that category. Got put there not because it's unsafe, but because of the Olympic doping scandals of the 80s. Fascinating story, but it needs to be rescued. It's a hormone, just like estrogen, thyroid, insulin. It should be a prescription, just like everything else. Number two, a female dose testosterone product. And then number three is for men. Will we get here in my lifetime with women? I don't know. But for men, at least, screening of testosterone. So when you turn 40 or you turn 50, and it's part of your health screening is you get a testosterone level.
And you think
Which
that will
then one
cover?
would say, shouldn't women? And
Yes.
you could say, yes. And then you can go down the whole rabbit hole of is menopause a disease? And that's a whole can of worms. But so remember, in the traditional medical system, you need a disease to get something paid for. So, or just looking, right? And so it's very interesting when it starts getting into like who's paying for things and screening if it's not a disease. It's you have to like literally change the paradigm. So I got off track. But
No, but
Okay,
that's
but it's interesting too about,
yeah,
preventative, what you want to be preventative. That's the
proactive versus
whole
reactive.
I think most Gen Xers do. I do not think, certainly insurance companies do not. Western medicine currently, even if Western medicine does, they don't have the bandwidth for that. They can't handle the sick people, let alone all the healthy people who want to stay healthy.
And
So it really, it's a paradigm shift.
it's interesting because you do talk about the fact that as Gen Xers, which we are, we're watching our parents age in not the healthiest way. And we're starting to question, wait a second, what could we put in place so that we age better?
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's insane that screening for the average person for osteoporosis starts at 65. That's insane. Your greatest, rate of bone loss is the last 2 years before your period ends.